Okay, all right. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, as I had said, is going to be our only kind of tutorial of the course. And the purpose of this tutorial is to most especially introduce you to the HUMOD program that you're going to be using as part of the short communications. There's a few other things I want to introduce you to as well. So my apologies to the people behind me, because I'll probably be driving from the laptop mostly here, so you're going to get my ass for the most part today. In any case, so the big project that we do in this course is the short communications. And I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the assignment itself per se, because I think the assignment is fairly well detailed in the syllabus. And then you have these 6 module videos that are on Quarkus that kind of guide you through each component of that project. So, you know, watch the video, it kind of walks you through relevant content, and then at the end kind of summarizes, okay, here's what your group needs to do to accomplish this module. The one thing I will point out here is that for short communication 1, which everybody has to do, we have you submit, module by module, and the purpose there is just to make sure that, you don't have a mistake in module 2 that then makes the whole rest of what you did useless. Maybe you come up with a question that's total garbage. We don't want you to do the whole experiment, and then the TA goes, your question really sucked, you got to do everything again. So module by module is just meant to make sure that we catch some problems, if there are some along the way, before you get too far along. But then for short communication 2, if you choose to do that, it's optional. You will do all the modules at once and submit everything together. Okay, so just note that small difference. So again, the module videos that are here on Quarkus are going to be your best friend for kind of guiding you through what is required for each module. HUMOD, which you're going to be using to simulate the experiments that you design. So the download for HUMOD is here on Quarkus, so it links to GitHub. So the particular version of HUMOD that you are working with is actually a custom version that we have here for you. So there are other versions of HUMOD that are out there that you could come across, but this is the one that we have been working to create for you. And we actually have this small group of students on campus. They're called the Computational Physiology Group, and they've been working to basically improve HUMOD, to make HUMOD better at sort of modeling the human body. The original version of HUMOD was built using data from middle-aged white guys, and so it was really good at modeling middle-aged white guys and couldn't really model anything else worth a damn. So we have been slowly working away at making it better at modeling females. One of my favorite stories is that when we first started doing this work, there was a folder in the program called uterus. And when you double-clicked on it, there was nothing inside. Like somebody had taken the time to make a uterus folder, and that's as far as they got in terms of the uterus. And then we had a student who worked on trying to build a functioning uterus in the program, and now it menstruates and all these kind of things. So we're getting better in terms of the modeling here, especially for its inclusivity. So download HUMOD from the GitHub link that's here. The only thing you have to be mindful of is that HUMOD is a Windows-only program. So if you are using a Mac, one option, and it's outlined here, is to install Wine onto your Mac. This link here takes you to a YouTube video where a guy walks you through how to do that. And then Wine basically will allow Windows programs to run on your Mac. If you're not a big fan of doing that, the computer labs over in BV, lots of Windows computers over there. You could always go down there, install HUMOD on those computers, run your experiments there. That's another option. But those are basically your 2 options in the event that you have a Mac. Okay, so before we get into HUMOD here, the other thing I wanted to just draw your attention to real quickly. So as I said, you're going to be submitting each module in short communication 1 at a time. one of the kind of rate limiting steps of getting the whole thing done is kind of waiting for the TAs to evaluate your work. Now in the syllabus, I think we say give the TAs 3 business days before you complain to me that why hasn't this been marked yet. Give them some time, right? They are doing other things aside from waiting for your submissions. So give them 3 business days, and if you haven't gotten feedback at that point, feel free to reach out to me and say, hey, this has been lingering around for more than 3 business days. Can you take care of it? And I will. But one of the things that I spent some time this summer doing was creating this AI peer reviewer for this course. And so the link was there in the short communication 1. And so what I would suggest is once you have any one of your modules kind of ready for submission, I would link to this AI peer reviewer and just tell it what module you are working on. So you can see that the 5 modules you have to submit are there. And then you basically enter your group number, okay? And I do that just because we can only have you submit once per group per module, just to keep this from becoming an unwieldy thing. And then you just drop your file here, and probably within about 30 seconds, you will get some peer review feedback from the AI. And the advantage here, compared to, say, just throwing it at ChatGPT, is this custom AI peer reviewer knows exactly what we're doing. Right? It knows what Module 2 is about. It knows what you're supposed to be doing. You know, it's specifically really trying to evaluate the novelty of your research question. You know, it knows exactly what we're asking for you, so it gives you more specific feedback than you would get from just the AI in general. So yeah, the hope here is that if you take your module and first throw it through here, you get a little bit of AI feedback, and then you can say, okay, I'll make those changes that it suggested, and then when I submit it to my TAs, hopefully there's a much higher probability that you will get approved by the TAs, and then you're not sitting around waiting 2 or 3 times for resubmissions to those TAs. So yeah, give it a try. I'm very happy to get your feedback on it as you use it. Did you think it was a useful tool? Did you think it was a terrible tool? Let me know, because it's definitely a new thing and a work in progress, and I'm happy to keep working to make it better. Okay, so then I want to spend the next time here talking about the HUMOD program itself. So this is what HUMOD looks like when you open it up. It comes to this screen here that it calls the chart, as you can see there at the top. And what you'll notice when you open up and you come to the chart is you'll notice that at the very top, it tells you the characteristics of the patient or the characteristics of the participant that it has loaded up. And it always, by default, loads up a male who's white, who's middle-aged. Now, the exact age varies, so this time it opened up at 32, maybe next time it's 35. It always gives you some kind of normal height, normal weight, normal BMI, but again, those exact values will vary. So you always start with a middle-aged white male who's kind of normal height, normal weight, normal BMI. You can absolutely change those participant characteristics. So if you're doing a study where you want to work with individuals who are female or black or old or fat or whatever the case might be, under the participants tab here is where you can change the participant characteristics. So if I want to make this a female, I can. With the ethnicity, you actually have the ability to even create mixed ethnicities. So if you want to work with, someone that's entirely black, no problem. I can scroll it that way, but maybe I've got, someone who's kind of a black Hispanic mix. Okay, I can create those mixed ethnicities. So one of the things you have to think about as you're designing your experiment is, what kind of participants do you want to do this study on, right? Do you want them to be, maybe you want both males and females, and so you can sometimes leave it as male, sometimes change it to female. Maybe you want it to always be white or black or, different mixed ethnicities. We can change the age, not precisely. So maybe you want to do a study on teenagers. Okay, so now you happen to have a 14-year-old. Next time you open the program up, maybe you get an 18-year-old. So you get a little variation here, which is good because that kind of replicates what a real study would be like. I can work with young adults, middle-aged adults, Here's an elderly adult at 76. I would, for the most part, stick away from infants at this time. We're still kind of working on that piece. Typically, the infants aren't quite scaled right. So oftentimes the infants die pretty quickly when you run them. So stick with teenagers or above. Yeah, so don't cry for them. They're pretend infants. But yeah, there's a work in progress there. So stick away from infants, but teenagers through elderly adults generally work pretty well. And then in terms of height, if you want to work with people who are very tall for some reason, you want to do a study on just tall people, or you want to do a study on people who are underweight or morbidly obese, or if you want to do studies on people who, have different levels of muscularity, you have full control over these participants, okay? So, yeah, just be mindful of that as you're designing your experiment, right? That you can kind of choose the participant group that you want to study, and then in HumMod, you're able to create the participant that you want. Okay, let me go back here to the chart for a second. Yeah, so right now we have this 6-year-old female, equal Black and Asian, it says. Obviously it's scaled down their height and weight to make them a 6-year-old. That's our current patient. Now, the next thing I'll point out here is if you look below that, you'll see where it says patient's current status. And here it just gives you a little bit of information about your patient. So right now it tells you, for example, your patient is sober, okay? Because actually one of the things we added is the capacity to have the patient drink. So the patient can get sober, they can get a little tipsy, they can even get blackout drunk if you want to pump them full of enough alcohol. So if you're interested in doing studies on like alcohol consumption and its effect on something, we can do that. The other one there says the patient is bedridden and on parenteral feeding. So that basically means, as it says, that your patient is lying in a bed with a tube in its arm feeding that way. This is kind of the best way to run HumMod, is to leave the patient in that condition. So if you're just doing a study on, like, say, hey, I want to see the effect of mixing ethanol with this other drug on its effectiveness or something, just leave the patient as a bedridden, patient. But you do also have the ability, if you go here into lifestyle, and you go into daily planner and control, you can put them onto a normal daily schedule. Right? And now the person will, sleep and work and rest and eat all on a schedule, okay? Again, what I would suggest is don't use the schedule if you don't need to, because it's slower, number one, and it's more likely to crash, number two. But if you want to do studies where you're looking at like, some scheduling thing, like maybe sleep deprivation, maybe you want to look at the timing of when people eat meals, the timing of when they sleep, or people who work or don't work, or if you want to study something where you want to play around with their schedule, then by all means, turn on the normal schedule. And then if you are in the daily planner schedule, here you can schedule out the person's whole day, okay? Now, it continues on the resolution. I haven't played around with the resolution of the screen here. It would continue on down till midnight there. But you can go in and you can control for every hour of the day, what does this person do, right? So right now, by default, they sleep from 10 p.m. through till 6 a.m. They get up and they kind of, what do they do there? Oh, they get up and they eat breakfast. They rest for a bit and then they work. They have lunch. They work some more. They rest. They have dinner. Right? They're running a typical schedule, okay? And again, if you wanted to do an experiment where you're like, hey, I would rather have these people mimic a night shift, so they're up all night and sleeping all day, you would just change their daily schedule this way. If you want to have them eat, 10 meals a day as opposed to the 3 meals a day, you can do that. So yeah, if you're interested in anything that would involve changing their daily schedule, then you would need to turn that daily schedule on, and then play with the schedule as necessary. Another thing I wanted to point out here, because this is something that we only newly added recently, is if you're interested in doing any kind of study that involves sleep, you have the option to have them sleep based on the schedule that you set. So in the case we just saw, they could sleep 10 till 6. Or you can have them sleep based on fatigue. And they'll basically sleep when they're tired, and they won't sleep when they're not tired. And so they'll still kind of try to follow your schedule. They'll still say, okay, I'm going to try to sleep between 10 and 6, but if they're not actually tired, then they won't sleep. And so if you wanted to get a sense of like, okay, well, what effect did this thing I did have on how much sleep they got per night? You could put them on to the sleep on fatigue, and then at the bottom there, it will always tell you how many hours of sleep they got in the last 24 hours. That could be your data point. You know, okay, well, if we loaded this guy up with alcohol, for example, he slept 10 times more hours than if he didn't or something. So you have that capacity there. Okay, sticking over here at the lifestyle tab, there are lots of other kinds of interventions you can do here. So you could mess around with their air supply, okay? You know, if you want to do studies with hypoxia, hyperpoxia, or hyperoxia, you want to change CO2 levels, maybe some kind of like futuristic climate change thing, water vapor pressure, carbon monoxide, isoflurane, which is a gas anesthetic. You can play around with that. The key thing here, and this is true for a lot of things, is make sure if you want to do this, you actually turn on those gas tanks, okay? Because if you just go in there and play around with the bars, nothing actually happens unless you've turned on the gas tank. So that essentially he's now breathing from the air that you've told him to breathe. So you could do studies that involve any of those things, playing around with the air they're breathing. If you, for some reason, want to do breath hold studies, you know, you can get this guy to hold his breath, okay, and he'll start breathing at some point again. You can't, I mean, I think, actually, no, I think you can control it pretty precisely. You can have him hold his breath probably till death if you wanted to. I've never really played too much with that, but you can start and stop the breath holding. You can control the diet on HumMod. So if you're interested in doing any studies that involve dietary manipulation, so the way that diet kind of works here is, again, you can either have his food intake controlled by his appetite, right? So he eats based on how hungry he is. Or you can have the intake controlled by goal. I'll show you what that means in a second. Or you can even have him fasting, and he just won't eat at all, right? So you could do studies on fasting if you wanted to. You can even control the temperature of the food that he eats. So if you want to give him all hot foods or cold foods, that can be done. And it's very similar here with water, too. You can either have the intake controlled by thirst, so he drinks when he's thirsty, or you can control precisely how much water he consumes. I don't have, and I guess I could add it in there at some point, we don't have an equivalent to fasting, probably because you would die pretty quickly if we just withheld water from you, but maybe it's an option. You could just set it to goal and set it down to 0. Yeah. Yeah, H2O2 percentage in the gas tank is the water vapor, yeah.
My question is, if we're simulating something that's like not possible on Earth, for example, how do they know that somebody would like live that long or that can happen?
Yeah, so they don't know, right? So yeah, so the idea here is that the program is a mathematical model, right? So it would simply try to extrapolate from the data that you have given it. Right, so whoever, the model has been built using data sets that are based on empirical data, and the idea behind building these mathematical models is that you can run these bizarre scenarios, non-Earth-like scenarios, and then say, okay, well, what does the mathematical model predict based on what it does know, based on the empirical data that it has, okay? Yeah, there's no way to know that that's exactly what would happen if you took a human person and did that. But the idea is that the model allows you to do that where research ethics wouldn't allow you to do that, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so you can control their water and food intake. And then if we go into diet and goal here, this is where you then can control precisely, if you've set it to eat on goal, you can set what that goal is, right? How many carbs and fats and proteins do you want this person to eat each day? How much salt and potassium and all these things do you want them to eat per day? You have precise control over all those things. So maybe you want to do a study where you're like, hey, I'm going to take calcium completely out of the diet, and we're going to see what impact that has on something, right? We can just scale the calcium right down to 0 and then, run our experiments and see what happens. Also in lifestyle, you can control the environment that this person is exposed to, right? So you can control the altitude that they're at. You want to do some high altitude experiments. Control the ambient temperature that they are exposed to. You can control the humidity. So this would be, if you just want to control environmental humidity as opposed to the air they're breathing. You can have them, at different wind speeds. You can simulate zero gravity situations, right? Why can't I get on this here for some reason? I can simulate zero gravity situations. I can simulate hypergravity situations. I can control their clothes, right? All the way from being naked through to having a swimsuit on, t-shirt and shorts, right? And I can control the light that they're exposed to as well, right? So again, you have all those things. Now again, here's something to think about, right? Let's imagine that you're doing a study. We've had this happen in the past. A student said, okay, I want to do a study where I'm going to expose my participants to, really cold temperatures. Okay, I'm going to put them down at negative 70 degrees. We had a group that was like, we want to think about like living on Mars or something. And they were trying to say, how cold can we make this? And they put it down to negative 70. And then they would come and they would complain to me and they'd say, well, Hummock keeps crashing and I don't know why. And you would look and you say, well, the problem is that you have them at negative 70, but then they're not wearing any clothes, right? And so then the program is crashing because at some point it's doing these mathematical calculations and the person is basically losing every pretty piece of body heat they have and they're dying because they've frozen to death. So if you're running into errors where the program seems to be crashing, you'll see an error box come up. And it's not the clearest thing in the world, but make a note of like, what is it showing me? Because even the program crashing and giving you an error can be insightful, right? We had students, for example, who would put on diabetes. And then they would complain, okay, we made a type 1 diabetic and they're fucking dying all the time. Why? Well, are you giving them insulin? No. Well, that's why they're dying, right? So, if you're getting these error codes, which basically says something has gone bad with your patient, look at the code and think, like, why is this person dying? And the deaths are just as valuable information as not dying, right? You can learn just as much from running the program and seeing it crash and saying what's going on as you can from the program successfully running all the way through. Okay, lifestyle, exercise. So you can control if you want them to be on an exercise bike or a treadmill. And then you can see that you have the ability to control the level that they bike at or run at. And with the treadmill, you can control this, the ramp slope and all these things. So if you want to do experiments where you want to have the person do some kind of exercise, you absolutely can. And then there's also posture. Whoops, I guess we're at sex. There's sexual activity. So by default, the patient is not going to be sexually active. But if you want them to be sexually active, you can, right? And then right now you can see the patient says, I'm not in the mood right now. I'm not currently having sex. But if their libido gets high enough, and you can see how you can adjust the partner probability. So if their libido gets high enough and they have access to a partner, then it'll flip over to say that they are having sex. And you'll see like, the heart rate and things go up. Again, it's a bit of a work in progress here too, the sexual activity stuff. So once they orgasm, they just by default go into like a standard refractory period and they won't have sex again for some period of time till that runs out. And then there is a possibility too, it talks here about times to failed erection. So you could do like erectile dysfunction kinds of studies and it'll keep count there of how many times the guy got excited, had a partner, and couldn't actually perform. So you could do studies there if you're interested in that. And then, yeah, posture was the other thing that was there where you can, change their posture, right? You can have the person either restrain them or request different postures. So you can say, hey, we request that you sit down, or we force you to sit down. We can put you on a tilt table. So maybe you want to like tilt them back 45 degrees or forward or something. So if you want to study posture, you absolutely can. So lots of things you can play around with there, right? In the intervention, more things to play with. Anesthesia, so you can either give them an IV anesthetic or a gas anesthetic. You can give them morphine, you can give them Narcan, so you can play around a little bit with that. I'll highlight some other things here. There's a ton of drugs. That's one thing too. There's a ton of drugs on HUMOD that you can give patients. So you may not necessarily recognize all of these drugs, but you can very easily look them up and see what they do. Some of them are still a work in progress, some of them better, but if I look, for example, where's, oh, there's ethanol. I was going to say it's got to be on there somewhere. I'll just use ethanol as my example here. So yeah, here's my ethanol drug screen. So I could have the person just take a single drink, and I can control how much they drink and what the alcohol content is, and just say, drink that now. And you can see now it says, yeah, at 12 a.m. on day 1, they consumed a drink. Then over there, the blood alcohol concentration, if we were simulating here, I can do that. So if you go to go is how you actually simulate ahead in time. So all we've done so far is play around with parameters, but if we actually want to start simulating and having things happen, we say, okay, go ahead 30 minutes. And you can see the blood alcohol concentration there went from 0 up to 0.36, right? Reflecting the fact that we had this guy drink, a beer basically, 500 mils, 5% alcohol, right? So you can see how you can gather your data here, right? It's giving you the values. So if I were doing a study where I was trying to figure out, okay, what is the effect of, some drug on my blood alcohol concentration, I might, give this person a beer, and I might say, okay, well, I'll measure their blood alcohol concentration 30 minutes later, and I'll just manually extract the data. Okay, that's one of the things that we can talk briefly about here. How do you get data out of HUMOD? It's very manual, okay? So you more or less have to run it for a certain length of time, and then manually record the values that you're interested in. Very similar to if you were in a lab, right? If you were in a lab and you were going to take some blood from this guy to measure blood alcohol concentration, you'd run it through whatever, and then you get a value spit out at you, and you would manually enter it into your spreadsheet to have that data, okay? So that's the easiest way to get data out, is just to record it directly off the interface here and put it into a spreadsheet to analyze. Okay, and so if I go ahead here again for another 30 minutes, let's say, actually I think I have to work on this still. I think we turned off we were playing with it, so I think we turned off the alcohol metabolism. So actually the alcohol will now just sit there in his blood. I'll fix that, get that back. But yeah, ultimately it would start to go down because he would metabolize that alcohol anyways. So you could also do chronic alcohol consumption. So a lot of the drugs are set up where you can tell the person to take it, right? And you can tell them how much and how many times a day. And you can even adjust it to say, well, take it when I have it, and kind of control how many drinks they have, when I want to, when I have it and want to. It's kind of a little bit more realistic, right? If you're thinking about people taking drugs, whether it's recreational or pharmaceutical, I could be on blood pressure medication, but maybe I forgot to take it today. And so you can actually play around with the likelihood of taking it. Maybe you make it so it's a 50-50 shot that this guy actually takes his medication, and you say, okay, well, I want to do a study looking at the effectiveness of blood pressure medication, and I can maybe play around with the likelihood of taking it, see, what percentage of the time do I have to take it for it to be effective. I mean, that's the kind of thing you could do. So again, there are tons of drugs here, and again, many of them are set up in a similar kind of way. Some of them are just straight up, here's furosemide. You simply can inject a dose at a given time. So this one's a little bit simpler in terms of its structure, but there are definitely other ones, other drugs that are more like the ethanol that I showed you, where you can, have a daily dose. Okay, this one's a daily dose. There's no forgetting or whatever. So each drug's a little bit different in terms of how it's structured, but lots of drugs there that you could play with. Okay. What else have we got here? We've got, if I play, hemodialysis, if you wanted to do that. You can put the person on a ventilator, right? So you could do studies there. There's a few tests here. So this is the oral glucose tolerance test, very common test for diabetes. So that's something that's built into the program if you want to do that. I'll flip over here to hormones. There's quite an extensive list of hormones here too. So you can both kind of monitor if you want to do like, hey, what is the effect of 10 minutes of treadmill exercise on hormone levels? I could certainly put on the exercise, run them, and then monitor what's happening with the hormones. But I can also manipulate the hormone levels, right? So, as an example here with insulin, I have the ability, for example, to just pump insulin into the body. I could turn on this pump and change its setting, and I could be adding additional insulin into this person's body and sort of see, well, what impact does this have, right? So most of the hormones are set up in that way where you can manipulate aspects of them. So if we look at, say, vitamin, let's look at, we won't look at melatonin. Let's look at aldosterone here. Same way, I can see there's a pump here, and I can see that I can change its setting. Actually, in this case, there's also a tumor. I could mimic an adrenal tumor pumping out different levels of aldosterone. I can even, in this case, control how well the aldosterone gets cleared from the body and degraded. So lots of opportunities here to manipulate the hormones of these individuals. There's also, so under a separate tab here are the sex hormones. So if you want to play around with estrogen levels, progesterone levels, testosterone levels, you can do that, right? So there again are pumps here where you can pump in more progesterone if you want, or change the rate at which the body degrades it, or if you just simply want to monitor how much is there in the blood plasma, you can do that too. So anywhere in HuMOD where you see the word pool, that just means like the plasma pool of that thing, right? So you'll see that word pool all the time in HuMOD. It's just the word that they use for the pool of, in this case, progesterone that's present in the blood plasma. Say, in this case, it's 0 nanomoles, because I think we're still on the 6-year-old girl here, so she's not going to have much progesterone there. And then, really, nervous system, you'll see there's not much. So I wouldn't try to design experiments that are about the nervous system. There is lots of stuff here in the circulatory system and the respiratory system. These are the two most well-developed body systems on HuMOD. So if you want to do studies that are about circulation or respiration, you've got tons of things you can manipulate and measure. There's also lots of metabolism stuff here. Okay, so if you want to monitor metabolic rates, there's lots of things there. What else was I going to say here? So you can also look at the various organs, right? So, and I'll actually highlight the uterus down here because this is, like I said, one of the ones that we built. So here, for example, it keeps track of, menstrual blood loss. So how much have you lost, the rate at which you're losing it, what was the duration of your last menstruation? So if you're interested in doing anything related to menstruation, and then you can see these reset buttons here. So if I want to reset the menstrual duration because we're getting ready for the next menstrual cycle, I can reset it here. And then kind of cool too. So again, the uterus, this was kind of a real big work in, where do I want to go here? I'll go to the size. Yeah, so right now, of course, as I said, we have a female, so she has a uterus, but you could also take the uterus out of that female if you want to give her a hysterectomy. The uterus comes out, and you can see now there's no volume, no mass. This was actually, there we go, back. That actually took the student who worked on that project quite a long time to make this uterus so that you could have it, but it wouldn't be there for a man, right? Because we were like, well, we can't put a uterus in and then suddenly males have uteruses too. It's not going to be fun. And there's a hope that at some point down the future we'll be able to, one of the things that my little group of people working on this project is trying to do is work on like pregnancies and fetuses showing up. And we have this lovely vision of one day, you've got the sexual activity turned on and suddenly HuMOD's like, I'm pregnant. And then like a second window pops up and there's the fetal HuMOD. That would be super cool, I think. That's a pipe dream of sorts. But anyways, you can also look at the other organs too. So if you want to get a sense of like, for example here, kidney nephrons, I can look at, what is the nephron count, how much urine is being filtered by the glomerulus. Like, you have a lot of information you can get. Here's the bladder, right? So one of the cool things about HuMOD is that, as the kidney is filtering out and making urine, the bladder is filling, and then, of course, at some point it'll empty, right? So you can kind of see when did they last void their bladder, how much did they void. The bladder actually changes, size based on age and race and sex and all these things. So you could look at like frequency of peeing if you wanted to, and like what effect does this drug have on the frequency at which you urinate or something. Like that would be another kind of project you could do. You can even see what's in the urine here. Actually, it's what's in the urine in the bladder here. We haven't looked at diagnosis, but one of them is a urine analysis. And if you want to say to the guy, hey, pee for me, because I want to analyze your urine. Oh, right now he says, I can't pee, I don't feel full enough, right? Well, that's good, that's realistic. He only had a little bit of urine in his bladder, so you'd have to wait until time goes on and his bladder fills, and then he can pee for you. So that's something you can do there, right? What else was in diagnosis? Yeah. There's not a whole lot in diagnosis that I would really get excited about here. We're working on the breathalyzer. It's a bit of a work in progress, so I wouldn't worry about it. But probably one of the last things to point out here is trauma. So there are different kind of traumas you can give. You can, for example, go in there and punch the shit out of Hamad guy, right? So if you want to take his right arm and basically beat it to hell, that's how we just did it. We just beat this guy's right arm to hell. And then we could kind of simulate and see, well, what impact did that have? We could do it for everything. We could beat every part of him up if we wanted to here. We can even damage the respiratory and skeletal systems here by just a push of a button. And that crashed it. What did I push? Respiratory damage. Oh, he died. The error message popped up on, see if I can drag it over here. But this is what you'll, I gotta go the other way. Where is it here? There we are. Hang on here. So yeah, see this error bar came up. This is the error that you'll get sometimes. And the key is, again, it's a little bit weird because a lot of it is more of a coding thing, but just kind of look around. I can see thorax hemorrhage, something happening. I gave him a respiratory damage, and then it's he seemed to have bled out into his thorax and that killed him. All right, well that tracks. Ideally you wouldn't want the program to crash, but at least it tracks the fact that, okay, this is what I did, this is what happened. And so just kind of make note of that, right? Because, again, those errors are just as insightful as the actual data. Now, the problem here is I'm going to say, okay, and then the whole program shuts down because it crashed, okay? But I can open it again, and the one thing you'll notice, I'll find my arrow here, if I open it again, I got to drag it over, give me a sec. It takes a little while to load up to. Just be aware of that. And obviously the speed at which it does anything depends on the processing speed of your laptop. But notice how this time it loaded up, again, a middle-aged white guy, but his age was now 31, not 32. Got a little bit different height and weight. So every time you close and reopen the program, you're going to get a new participant, okay? So when you're doing your studies, ideally you're going to be, maybe have 10 participants in one group and 10 participants in another that you're comparing. Every time you want to close the program down, reopen it to get a new participant, right? That way you're getting some natural variation in the people that you're including in your study. You don't want to do 10 clones against 10 other clones. That's not really realistic science. So make sure you close the program each time, open it up, and you have a new participant that you can work with. I think that's a pretty good tour. So at this point, I'm going to ask if there are any questions people have about either HUMOD or about the project in general that we could tackle here. Yeah.
Regarding HUMOD, you see when we go to trauma for the damage that the body takes, do you have to do that during the experiment, or can you schedule something?
Well, what you would, yeah. So what you would do here, so until you go to that Go tab, it's like time is frozen, okay? So you could, let's say you want to, you could do it right now. I could say, okay, I want to beat up his right arm a little bit, right? And then he's beat up at that point, but then until I start simulating ahead in time, that's when I'm going to start to see the actual effects.
So you go to the time that you want the next thing to happen?
Yes. Yeah, so I can go ahead 30 minutes and maybe I beat him up again and I increase the damage, or I turn it back down or something. So yeah, time is frozen in HUMOD until you say go. And you'll notice at the bottom in the gray bar there where it says solving and done. So that's how you'll know what the program is doing, right? So if we say go, another 30 minutes here, you'll see at the bottom it just says solving and then eventually done, right? So as long as it says solving, you know, and if hopefully the dots are progressing, you know it's working away. Obviously, if you say go ahead 90 days or something, it's going to take time for that to happen. I would generally advise to go, smaller chunks of time and to kind of plan out shorter experiments just to save you time too. You don't want to spend your whole life sitting in front of the HumMod screen trying to simulate years and years of time. But yeah, basically time is frozen while you aren't saying go. You can make the manipulations you want, but then nothing will actually happen until you hit go. You go ahead for however length of time you want to go. Maybe then you record your data. Okay, I hit him in the right arm. I simulated a head for an hour. I can see his heart rate went up or something. Yeah, okay. Don't forget too, one of the other things I would suggest, actually this is a pretty important thing, is generally speaking, when you first open up HumMod, I would set your patient characteristics, set them to what you want to be, adolescent, female, whatever. Generally speaking, we would advise you to then go ahead a week once you've set your patient, because it actually makes the program a little more stable. Again, it's a mathematical model, so once you play around and change the person, sometimes just giving it a week to kind of do its thing and kind of restabilize before you then start your experiment is a good idea. All right, so you can see it solving here. And then you can see the top corner, or the top there, right? It's got the date and time, right? So you can see where you are. It's now Sunday, the 7th day, 1:30 in the morning on Monday now, day 8. So I can see where I am in terms of time. So it always opens up on a Monday, day 1 at 12 a.m. in the morning, and then you can see where you are. But yeah, generally speaking, give it a week of simulation time after you've set your patient characteristics to what you want them to be. That'll generally kind of stabilize it a bit, and then at that point, you can run your experiments. This gets discussed in the module on study design, but again, make sure that you have control patients that you're also running, right? So I have a patient that I've punched in the right arm here, and maybe I simulate a head for a week and see what happens, but I also need patients that I have not punched in the arm, right? That I can run as controls to say, okay, well, here's what a control patient looks like, and then here's what a punched in the arm patient looks like, and any differences I see, I can attribute to the punch in the arm that I gave them. Other questions? Yeah. Yeah, you can use a Mac for the program, but you have to download the Wine program and run it through that. So there's a YouTube video on Quarkus that guides you through that process, okay? Yeah.
Is it a zip file with a tod.qc file?
Say that again?
Do you download zip file with a tod.qc file?
It's gonna be a zip file. Yeah, it should be a zip file that you're probably looking for. Anything else? Everybody's okay? Yeah? Don't troubleshoot. Don't try to troubleshoot errors. If you get an error in the program, what I would suggest is you say, okay, I make note of what I think the error is telling me, okay? You could then just alert me and be like, hey, I keep running into this error. What do you think's happening? And then we can talk it through. But don't bang your head against walls with errors, okay? Because I've had students do that in the past too, when they lash out at some point later and they're like, God damn, HumMod, why are you this? Like, just, if you're getting errors, make note of what the error is, and then kind of reach out to me, and we can see if we can figure out together how to finesse what you're doing to avoid that error and what we can learn from that error. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? I'd say most importantly, as a final thought here, is try to have fun with this, right? Like, I envision this as kind of a really fun thing you can do, right? Like, it's very rare in your undergrad that you get an opportunity to be like, okay, carte blanche, here is an experiment that I can come up with a question, design the experiment, run it, get the data, see what happens. Like, just try to have fun with this assignment, okay? Because it should be fun, I think, okay? Like I said, if you're running into errors, just reach out to me. We can figure these things out together. I don't want you to be getting frustrated by HuMod. I want HuMod to be this cool tool that allows you to generate these data sets, and who knows, we have had actually one group in the past few years who actually published their work that they had done in this course. They published it in an undergrad journal, basically saying, yeah, here's the results we got. We had another group that tried that and got themselves caught in a little bit of a plagiarism issue and didn't work out so well, but they're trying to resubmit somewhere else. So this could turn into a publication too, right? If you wanted to follow it beyond, C32, there's a precedent out there that you could actually publish this. There are definitely lots of undergrad journals where they would be happy to publish this work. So keep that in mind too. Okay? That's all I got. So I guess if there's any other questions, people can come down and we can chat about it. But otherwise, I guess enjoy the rest of your afternoon and your weekend, and I will see you on Tuesday. What's up?
I actually just had a question when I got up. Like, do you think that the time also matters? Like, for example, right now it's at 1:30 a.m.
Yeah.
And then if you change it to like maybe in the afternoon and like give it like drugs or something, do you think that would affect it?
Yeah, I think, especially if you have the schedule running normal, it could definitely affect things because ultimately, you've got all these kind of background processes that are happening as you like sleep and rise and eat and whatever. So, especially when the schedule is on, I think the answer is probably yes.
And then if you want to like repeat it, you should try to do it the exact same way every time to see.
Yeah, I would say, I would think, because every time you open the program, you're having a new participant. So, yeah, I would run your experiment the same way again, and sort of, because you don't want there to be variables that are, sometimes we did this at 6 and sometimes we did it at 2 and sometimes we did it at 1. So, yeah, I would run the experiment the same way every time. It's just now I've got a different participant, and so let's see,
What's different?
yeah, like we have our control group and our treatment group, and they have slightly different participants in each, but so we're going to get some variability.
Yeah.
But does the treatment that we're doing, is it significant enough that it overcomes that variability among patients to actually have some true effect? Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. What's up?
We have the Mac, right? So we have to download Wine first, and then
Yeah.
we sort of missed like the beginning here part. So when we go here and we open this one, which one do we download?
So go back. So where are you here? Go back. So you're in. So you're going to GitHub. That's where you were. Yeah. So what you want here is the zip file. Yeah. So this I linked here just to be like there are other versions, but the one that you want is that one.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So
I have a Mac, so I have to use Wine. Is it any different from one?
like the HuMod that you'll use for Wine.
Yeah, I mean, are they different?
No. So all that Wine does is allows the Mac to run HuMod.
Oh,
So it's the exact same version. It's just that it sort of has to do like the interpretation between Windows language and Mac language to actually get it. But it's the same version.
okay. And is this like the first and the very last tutorial we're gonna have?
This is the only tutorial we're going to have. So next Friday it'll be. Okay, just leave it there and then we'll see if they come back here. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Yeah, okay. Yeah, all the rest of the Fridays will be lectures.
Oh, okay.
At
So
this time.
they'll be coming.
You'll be coming here and we'll have a lecture. Yeah. Okay? Okay. How's it going?
Nice to meet you.
What'd you say?
Joshua.
Jason, nice.
Introduce myself. I just had two questions.
Sure.
The first one is, so I've sort of had a look at the short communications one, but in that first, like, I've got like those parts.
Yeah.
That first one explains exactly what we have to do in the project, but it just says citations. So
Yeah.
if I watch that video, I can be like, okay, like once you get put in your groups, this is what you have to do.
Yeah, so the first video is just literally talking about citations, like just why do we cite, how do we cite.
Okay.
There's nothing you actually have to do for that one other than watch it. So it's really, you can do that anytime. It's module 2 where it walks you through like how do you come up with a good research question. And then at the end sort of says like, okay, this is what you're going to do for this module. You're going to write a little introduction that kind of gives the background that leads to your question and talks about why it's novel and relevant. And that's what you'll be doing with your group.
Okay, so as a group we come up together with a research question.
Yes.
And then for all the tests that we're running on HUMOD,
Yeah.
is it like one person's running the tests and we all submit the data?
Yes, it's all done as a group, so you can decide how you want to do it. You could have one person who's going to run all the simulations, and then somebody else says, okay, well, I'll plot those data now, and then somebody else does whatever. You could split it up too. You could say, well, there's 4 of us in the group, so why don't we each run 2 patients, and and we'll each collect the data that way. So it really just comes down to how your group wants to function.
Okay. The other thing as well is I work full-time as a paramedic.
Yes,
so,
okay.
I try and watch the lectures online.
Yeah.
I won't be, my schedule changes all the time. I don't know if
Sure.
I'm physically going to be in class a lot.
Yeah.
I just want to let you know so I'm not just doing nothing.
Yeah, and there are lots of people, who are in that same. Yeah, we have tons of paramedics who've taken this course over the years. So yeah, that's where the recording becomes really flexible, and the exams everything being online, quiz-wise and exam-wise too, makes it so that you don't have to worry about. Yeah, just fit your schedule. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your
Perfect.
time.
No problem. You too. All right, what's up?
Mr. Brown,
Yep.
one quick thing before I go. Here, just give me 1 second. Very interesting website. So the HUMOD thing, all this stuff over here, everything else. So, I wasn't exactly sure how I was supposed to do things.
Yeah, so it's down
Down in the user.
the asset. So it's this source code zip.
That
That's
one?
what you want. Yeah.
Just this one. What about the tar
Yeah, I don't know what the TarGZ does, but the zip is the one that Windows will work with. I forget what TarGZ is, but yeah, if you download that one, yeah, you're on a Windows computer. So then ultimately you'll unzip this.
And it'll just take you straight into it.
So it'll unzip it and you'll have this folder. You'll unzip it and you'll have this folder. And then inside there will be the hummod.exe program to execute.
We're going to set up for the next orientation.
Yep, I'll get